Hello, and welcome to A Blast from the Past, where we use time machines to go back in time and get famous historical figures and ask them what it was like from their perspective. Today we have with us in studio Martha Washington. Martha, what was it like when you and your husband George were trying to break away from Britain?
Well, it all started after the 7 Years' War when British leaders wanted to go get new revenues from the colonies. These revenues would then be used to cover war costs. They would also pay for the expenses of maintaining an army to defend colonies. We thought this was very unfair because we were not the ones fighting in the war, it was British. In 1765, Parliament imposed the Stamp Act on the colonies. This act required certain printed materials, such as legal documents and newspapers, to carry a stamp showing that a tax had been paid to Britain. The Stamp Act was repealed in 1766, which ended immediate crisis, but the cause of the dispute was not resolved. Crisis followed crisis in the 1770s. To counteract British actions, the colonies organized the First Continental Congress, which met in Philadelphia in September 1774. Members urged colonists to take up arms and organize militias.
Well, how did the fighting start?
Well, the fighting finally started between the colonists and the British Army in April 1775 in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. This was when my husband was chosen to be the commander-in-chief.
Wow, that sounds really scary. Were there any moments when you were really scared for him?
Well, yes, since he was the commander-in-chief, he was a very big target, so this was very scary.
How was the fighting finally resolved?
Well, finally, the French supplied arms and money to the rebels. We got a lot of help from other countries, and the British were having to start to try to fight other people, the French, and us. So when General Cornwallis was forced to surrender to the American and French forces under Washington at Yorktown in 1781, the British decided to end the war. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783 and recognized the independence of the American colonies.
Well, how did you feel about all this when it was finally over? How was it?
Well, when it was finally over, I was very relieved. I was glad that the fighting had stopped and that it wasn't going to be as dangerous for me and my husband, George.
Well, I guess that's it for us today. Thank you, Martha, for being in studio, and be sure to join us next time. We interview someone else, maybe Abraham Lincoln, maybe Martin Luther King Jr., maybe Bear Bryant from the past. That's it.
Well, thank you for having me. Goodbye.